All right, you guys. So today I'm going to try a project that I have never actually done myself before, but I think we have a pretty good design plan. Let me show you a picture of that. I've made the jigs for you. Let me go ahead and pause this and turn it around so you can see where we got it on the template wall. All right, so here on the template wall, I've got serving tray part 1 and part 2. We're going to take those down and measure them and get ourselves a cut list. So we're going to measure the length and width of each of these pieces. Part 1 and part 2. Alright, length, width, quantity. So the length here, and you'll see there are two lines right here. That's going to be the final dimension, but in order to make it work for the machines that we're going to operate, we need to leave a little extra meat so we can screw into it and not have it damage the material that's actually going to be a part of the tray. So the actual length will be 20 inches, but we're going to cut our piece originally to 24 inches. And the height, you'll want to just measure the width, measure that there. So I have 2 5/8 by 24. 2 5/8 by 24. And I'll need 2 of these because these are my sides. So 2 of those. And this looks like 19 5/8. And you're going to want to measure the widest part on this. And on this one, I want you to add an extra 1/8 of an inch because we're going to cut this a little big so that our router will then clean up the top. So it measures 2 7/8. I'm going to go ahead and go to 3 inches total. All right, so 3 inches. I had those backwards. Length is 19 5/8 by 3 inches. This should have been 24 by 2 5/8. Okay, and quantity on this is 2 as well. And then there's a part number 3 that I don't have a jig for because we don't need it, but that will be our bottom piece. Okay, so this is a side, this will come in here and be the end with the handle right in here, and then we'll have the piece that's on the bottom that connects everything together, and that will be our 20 inches minus a 1/2 of an inch because we're gonna have a 1/4 of an inch inset. So I'll do the math on that and get it figured out, and I'll write that on this here for you. You'll see I wrote here on the side of serving tray part number 1, the bottom of the tray will be a 13-inch width, 19-inch length, and 1/2 inch thick, of which I have a fair amount of plywood right now that can work for the 1/2 inch bottom. All right, we've got our cut list. Let's mill up our pieces. So here we go. We've got our list. Part number 1 is going to be 2 5/8 wide. Part number 2 is going to be 3 inches wide. So hopefully some of you guys will be able to find stuff in the scrap bin like I did. Otherwise we're going to have to mill that up, and we'll start by ripping the 3 inches, and we can then mill down to the 2 5/8 for the other one. So if you have a full board, mill enough material for your 4 parts, 2 plus 2, right here, 2 plus 2, their lengths, mill enough at 3 inches to get all that out, and then you can always cut down to 2 5/8. I'll show you what I mean by that when we get there. Always start with a straight edge on your board. Okay, so after having milled up my material with a straight edge on it, I'm going to set the bandsaw to my 3 inches, which is going to get the width of my part number 2. So there I am. I'm going to make sure my fence is locked down, bandsaw set up, and I've got a piece of material that's at least 3 inches, if not more, from the scrap bin. This one happens to be 4 inches, so we'll be ripping off about 1 inch of that. And I have 2 other pieces here that are larger than the 2 5/8 number, and I'll be milling those down as well. So there we go. I'm ready to roll. I'm going to start with 3 inch and I'll move to 2 1/2. I'm going to put this on time lapse so you don't have to watch me do all my work super slow. Alright, so we got our stuff cut to width. Now we're going to cut it to length. So my less wide material is going to go to the 24 inch, and my 3 inch stock will go to the 19 5/8. So I'm going to start with the 2 5/8, cutting it to 24 inches. Alright, now I've got my pieces cut to rough length and width. And what I'm going to do now is trace. We're going to get these back off the wall. So remember, you should technically, after you've taken your dimensions, put these back up on the wall so you know you'll find them again. So we're always returning these to the template wall when we're done with them. Now I've got them back. Once my pieces are cut to length and width, I'm going to go ahead and start tracing these. Be sure you feel that it is flush on your straight edge. You're going to want to remember to also mark for the final dimension, which are these vertical lines here. Okay, so I just went back and did that because I forgot to do it on my first tracing. But those vertical lines will transfer over with the square in order that you know where that's going to get cut off and where you can put the screws before that gets cut off. All right, let's take it over to the scroll saw. Okay, it's time for us to do our scroll saw work. Check the blade tension. Okay, we're going to lift up our foot. Now, one thing you'll notice with the tray is if you get going and you don't have any sort of relief cut, you might hit this. So what we want to do is about half of it one direction and half the other. So we're going to start by making a relief cut towards the middle of the piece. Maybe I'll make 2 of them just to be safe. And you'll see I'll come in from one direction and then I'll spin it around and come in from the other direction. The key to this is do not touch the line whatsoever. In fact, if anything, stay a 1/16 or an 1/8 away so that the router can just take off the rest. And I'll show you that and it'll all make sense why you don't need to take the line, nor do you even have to have it close to perfect. But the key is do not touch that line with your scroll saw. All right, here we go. All right, you guys, now that we have our materials cut to rough length and width, and we've cut the general shape in there, this is perhaps the most critical part of the whole thing. What you need to do is ask your teacher for the routing template for each of your pieces. And what you're going to want to do is, you'll see it comes like this. It has screws holding together the jig, and then there's 2 screws that'll be sitting proud with these washers. You're going to want to remove those with their washers, one at a time. And just set them aside. And then you're going to want to line up the line that you marked for the actual position of your tray, the actual end of your tray there, as well as flushing out the bottom. Okay, that's the most important, is that you flush at the bottom. Okay, theoretically, as long as you see some amount of material when you're flush at the bottom, this will route it to the right curve. So once you have it flush and you have those lines about lined up the way you need them, you're going to take a pre-drill and come into the hole that's already there and just pre-drill a little bit so that that screw knows where it's going to go into your material and it has memory. It's going to follow that path. Once you've pre-drilled it, you're going to take the screw gun and make sure it's screwed down. Double check, make sure you're flush, and that turned out really nice. May not be able to see it there, but nice and flush. So you're going to carry on and do that for each side. So obviously we'll have to, after we've routed this whole thing out, we'll take it off and we'll put it on our next piece. But what I like to do is do part one onto one of my pieces, and I'm going to apply this to one of my side pieces so that I can do these two, then come over, take them off, and put them back on the other two. So in fast motion, I'll just get these two dialed in, and then we'll head over to the router table. All right, now you've got, this is serving tray part 2. One thing you're going to need to do is mark out for the handle on there. And this is the router template that you'll get from Mr. Coop or your woodshop teacher. And with that, you want to flush the bottom out and get your lines about at the right spot for the side to side that we marked when we were setting it up. Okay. And when you've got it flush on the bottom and side to side you're lined up with your marks, go ahead and trace that inside part of this template. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually drill out the majority of this material beforehand so that the router doesn't have to do as much work. So you've got that marked, and the next step is to come. So I should have mentioned you can mark them both at the same time. Get them both marked out, and then I'll show you what it is to drill out and get most of the material out of the way. So I've got this one drilled out, and I got this one marked. Now I have this one marked. So you've got the marks on both of your trays. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and put it on top of a scrap piece of wood and find a Forstner bit or a drill bit that is smaller than the diameter between those lines. And you can set this up in the drill press. It may be a wise idea for those of you guys who don't feel like you can drill very straight. And then you can line it up, get it right where you need it. And start drilling. So I'm going to put this into fast motion so it doesn't take so long. And I'm going to drill a few holes to get basically a big cavity in here that then the router can come in afterwards. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, now that we have our template screwed onto our piece and we've hollowed out the interior of serving tray part 2, we're just connected here on part 1. we're coming over here to the Incra router table that's set up with the top bearing bit. So that bearing is going to ride right against your template, and the blade is going to ride and cut along this path. So you should have already taken this test, made sure that you can pass the test on this. The whole reason I have these handles on here is so you can keep your hands away from the blade. As always with the routers, we're going to go from left to right. We're moving that direction only. Okay? So let's go ahead and fire this thing up. Make sure you hold it here, left to right. Keep your distance. Safety equipment is on, and other people are away from you. This is a very dangerous tool. Make sure that you have your zone. No one's messing with you. Let's check it out. So make sure your router is on, and then you can turn the Kreg safety switch on. Got my safety equipment, here we go. Look at how nice that arch turned out. It's going to do exactly what that template does. So it looks pretty good. That's good rest. Okay, so now we've gotten our two curves routed in. Those will still need some sanding, but they've got the basic shape and looks pretty nice. Now we got to work on this inside section. So to do that, it may be helpful to have a partner with you, but what you're going to do is basically lay it in and try and keep it as centered as possible on one of the holes that you've drilled. Okay? And once you've got it nice and centered and it's not moving anywhere, have a friend. In this case, I don't have a friend, so I'm going to be doing it. I'm just going to hold it really still. Turn it on, and once the router's on full speed, you can move it towards. First thing I'm going to do is push that way, so the router bit goes into this side of the template, and then I'm going to go in a clockwise direction with my material. Well, the material I'm going to push counterclockwise, but I'm going to have the bearing go clockwise against my stuff, my template. So watch. Make sure you do it all the same way as I'm doing it right here. So I had that wrong in regards to how I told you the first time. I'll make notes on the screen and talk over myself to make it right for you. There you go. It's got a nice handle on it. The general shape looks good. This is a project I like. Let's move on. Okay, we're going to repeat the process for our next two. Let's go ahead and do that. Put it on fast motion. So I'm going to try that again with regards to the inner part. I'm going to place it in there, get it nice and centered, and then we're going to be going down and making our way around, pulling it counterclockwise. Okay, here we go. So a few notes on routing. One, if you ever feel it pulling, that means you're probably going the wrong direction. That's what happened the first time. I recognized I was going the wrong direction because it was pulling my material. Number two, you never want to lift, you neither want to put it on or lift it off of the router bit if it's on. You wait until complete stop. You probably saw that I just did that. That way you don't damage your material or the template, okay? So those two things, and then just make sure you're going nice and slow. If you need to, check it right after you're done, make sure it's smooth. If it's not smooth, give it another pass, all right? Hope you enjoyed that section. Now we've got all our parts, we're ready to put our dados in so that it is ready to receive the panel for the bottom. Okay, you guys, we just got done with routing. Let's make sure to return the templates in the same way we found them. So I just want to pull the screws up, but not all the way out, so that they remain with the jig. Okay. So you've got your piece here, jig. You're going to hang up here in a second. Give it back to Mr. Coop, or your teacher. So here we go, we've got our two identical end pieces. We have two identical, not the wood grain of course, but two identical side pieces. So now we're going to go route the dado into it, but first we're going to give these back to Mr. Coop or hang them up where he told us they belong. So at this time, you're going to want to decide which is going to be your inside and outside of each piece. So as I'm looking at this, I see a little bit of a chinger in the wood here, so I'm going to choose to have this as my outside because it's a little cleaner. So what I'm going to do is, for my inside piece, just draw a little line right here to remind myself. That's the area that I want to route out. So I need to have that face down. Okay? So I've chosen that one. So I have set up this specific router for a dado. It's going to be a 1/2 inch thick. Okay? So it's a stock feeder. You just got to make sure you set it in correctly and let it come out without any hindrance. Okay? Alright, you guys, now we've got our pieces all made, and they have their dados in there for the plywood that we'll be installing. And I've already set up my first piece here, ready for the top side. So you'll want to have a square that you line up with your mark at the top, and draw a line down, and maybe draw a line down on the edge as well. And so you have a continuous line. That'll let you know where the long point of your joint is supposed to be. So I've done that here, and then on this saw there's a button for the laser. which is back here. I'll go ahead and show that to you. So on the saw, right here is the button for the laser. Okay, the laser will help you to line up your piece. As you can see there, the laser is right behind the line, and that's where I want it for now. When we're operating the saw, I'll give you one more visual. I have put a Kreg clamp right here after I got it lined up. So this piece is not going anywhere. That's going to allow for me to have two hands up on the saw, which will make this safe for all parties involved. So in order to operate this saw, once I have my piece there, it's clamped. I see it's not moving. To operate the saw, we're pressing the button at the top, and then we're holding with two hands. Remember, you will not be using the saw unless you have been given express permission from Mr. Coop and received a tutorial on exactly how it's to be used. What I'm going to do is do all of the right side cuts first on all my pieces, and then rotate the saw to 45 degrees the opposite direction to cut those pieces. Alright, so as you can see, I've got all my pieces cut. One thing I wanted to mention regarding cutting those miters is you always want to make sure that your dado is towards the fence, right? You always want to be looking at the finished side when you set up the 45-degree angle and you're cutting from the long point to the short point. So let's just stand this thing up, see how it looks. Now we just need to cut our center panel. Okay, here I have some 1/2-inch plywood, and I use little 1/4-inch shims to be able to clamp this off because it's thinner than 3/4-inch stock, which these are set for. It's just a faster, easy way to do it. These are 14 inches wide right now. We're gonna have to cut it down to 13 on the bandsaw, but I'm gonna go ahead and cut it to length first, then we'll head to the bandsaw. Here we go. Now it's time to see if she fits in. As she ought. Okay, it's looking pretty good. Now we're gonna have to do this same process over again, but with glue. So let's do that. All right, so I did a dry fit and it all looks good. And the best clamp, I think, for this specific situation for you guys is to use this Bessey strap clamp with the 4 little corner hugger deals. Yeah, so that's in place. Now we just got to actually do it with glue in it. So I'm going to lift this out. And basically I'm going to run glue in each of these parts, reassemble it, and then strap this clamp down. So primarily we're just putting glue right into the dados, and then we will also be hitting the miter joints. So I'm going to clear out the glue bottle here. That's good. So here we go. I'm going to speed this up.